Welcome back, everyone. Derch here, and I wanted to talk to you guys today about drop rates in Borderlands 4, but also just drop rates throughout the history of our Borderlands franchise. Because to talk about them in this game, kind of like the story and all that, I think we need to put it into context of how Borderlands has done it historically. So the way I look at drop rates, there's kind of 6 categories of drops. Number one, and the most important one, in my opinion at least, is dedicated drop sources. So this is, there's a certain gun, it drops from a certain boss. How can I go find that gun? So if you want that gun, you have a place to get it. This is the primary way a lot of people farm. Number two is world drops. So world drops are just legendary guns dropping from any source out there on the map. This is unreliable, but it also can be fun if there's good places to get world drops and just finding random drops. There's a lot of this in Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 3, not so much in the other games. I've never gotten the balance of this quite right, although I think Borderlands 1 was the closest, but there's some problems with that I'll talk about when I get to Borderlands 1. Number 3 is large range sources. This isn't quite world drops, but it's close to it. It's like tubbies where you can get a bunch of different things, like, you know, the pearls and the class mods, or like legendary loot midgets, things of that nature, where it's like a bigger pool and it's kind of like world drop farming, but there's like a dedicated spot for it. Vendor farming is generally not a good thing, but never getting good things out of vendors is not good either. Because if you're just vendor farming, you're not playing the game. You're just save resetting and going to a hub down. That's not exactly ideal either. And there's been some weird balances with these as well. Grinder / crafting or re-rolling parts on guns. This is a form of farming, and this stuff I think is really good, but it should supplement. So like the grinder, they replaced boss dedicated drop sources with a grinder, which was bad. But if you would add the grinder to dedicated drop sources, then it can be good. Just kind of like some of our re-rolling things we had in Borderlands 3 of anointments, and then Borderlands 4 for firmware. I think this stuff is a good thing, but like, again, it's got to supplement, not replace. And then the sixth one is farming for non-red text items, so just purples and blues. This is somewhere where I think Borderlands 2 ended up having this the best, oddly enough, even though it had like the worst drop rates for regular guns. And we'll get into that. So when you have these 6 sources, and this is to me farming, because all of these matter for farming. Farming isn't a one source solution. There's multiple parts of it, because you need to farm for different things, and some things are just different fun for different people as well. So opening up that is important as well. So Borderlands 1, let's talk about it. There was some dedicated sources, but very few, and not all weapons, or not even many weapons. It was almost non-existent. Borderlands 1 was almost all world drop farming. Now, just playing through the game, I think Borderlands 1 was pretty good for this, and probably had the best balance overall, because you would just find legendaries throughout your playthrough. You would just get lucky. But the end game of Borderlands was just world drop farming out of 2 sources, and one was a glitch. So number 1 was, oh my god, I forgot the raid boss. The only raid boss in the game. Craw. And then it was Nox's Armory, which honestly, most people did that with a glitch. So half of the end game or more of Borderlands 1 was a glitch, which is kind of sad. But it was just random chest farming and hope you get lucky on things. And Craw had some dedicated drops that he could do, but it was also a lot of world drop farming. So that's the problem with Borderlands 1. It was really 2 sources for farming, and it was very random. It was hard to get the exact gun you wanted. But world drop farming is also a lot of fun. I enjoy it. Just like see what's going to drop, see what you can find, and then maybe like, oh, I never thought about that. Let me try this gun. I really enjoy world drop farming, but it's also not efficient, so I need my dedicated drop farming. And Borderlands 1 was missing that, and it just had the world drops. Borderlands 2 overcorrected on the world drops and made them almost non-existent, which wasn't good. But Borderlands 2 also was really good for some of the other categories. So dedicated sources, Borderlands 2 was great. It did have the problem of some crowded loot pools with things like the Sham. I know there's plenty others, but that's the big one coming to mind right away. Then some of the evolved enemies can be really hard too, like the Twister and the Northfleet. So, but in general, like those were exceptions to the rule. In general, like you could go to Savage Lee and get the Herald. You could go, just go get your fastball from Bull. Like it was fairly easy to go find these unique enemies. Some of them had kind of longish runs, which made them a little bit of a pain. But for the most part, farming in Borderlands 2 was really good because of all those dedicated spots. And that's been some of the charm of Borderlands 2 for a long time. It also did good with the large range sources. Tubbies and chubbies, there's certain spots where they're very common to fall, so you could farm for those. And then, of course, the loot midgets, which was kind of a glitch that you could leave that open and keep refarming them over and over again. But that was a great run. It wasn't too long to get them. They could drop a huge range of things. There was 4 of them in that room. Or you could go to other maps where they're common to pop up. And that was a lot of fun for a lot of people. And it's kind of like world drop farming, but that like source. And I don't think Borderlands 3, there was loot midgets in Borderlands 3, and there was one that was really common. On your way to Lady Hammerlock, Aurelia. But I think they patched that out, which was kind of sad. But Borderlands 3, it dropped so many world drops that Grave Ward was kind of an example of this for a while, but I think they patched that as well. This is one area where I think Borderlands 3 had it at the start. They kind of patched it out and they didn't really keep it, but then the world drops were so common you didn't really need it. And world drops were less exciting in Borderlands 3 because they're just everywhere. And that wasn't great. But anyways, back to Borderlands 2. Vendor farming was non-existent in Borderlands 2. You never got legendaries from a vendor. It was too scaled back again. It had nothing like grinding or crafting or re-rolling parts in Borderlands 2, so that didn't exist yet in the franchise. And non-red text farming, Borderlands 2 did this the best because the snowman chest, really. It was almost the only place in a lot of these games where you could go kill a boss and then a bunch of chests open up and you would have a dedicated shotgun slot, assault rifle slot, grenade slot. So if you wanted a transfusion grenade, which is a common purple drop people wanted in Borderlands 2, or blue or purple class mods, you could go to the snowman and get them. And I don't think any other game has really done this as well as the snowman. And I kind of hope in Borderlands 3 we get something like that again, because there's a lot of good purple guns and underbarrels and stuff that we want to find, and it's really hard to find them right now. The pre-sequel then went backwards from Borderlands 2. They took away a lot of the dedicated sources, and they had a weird reason that people would write letters and say it ruined the lore because these bosses were dead and they kept coming back and it confused them. But that's also what we want in Borderlands. Enemies just respawn. So it was a weird thing of them responding to some complaints, but the larger player base that actually plays the game hated that response. And so they rolled that back, but there still wasn't enough of it. And there's too many things that didn't have a dedicated source in TPS. And then TPS, like Borderlands 2, the world drop rates were still garbage. However, And they also kind of dropped the large range sources. There was like not really tubby or loot midget sources. You could find them, but like it wasn't reliable. Vendor farming was sadly a thing in Borderlands pre-sequel. Legendaries would drop in vendors a lot, but then you're just running around your hub town farming vendors and not playing the game. And then also the grinder was one of your main sources to like, you can find a bunch of legendaries you don't want, and then you go to Iwajira basically to get an easy legendary, and then you would grind that to get the legendary you wanted. And yeah, you were killing Iwajira, but like you're just sitting there at the grinder doing grinding, and that's not really playing the game either. So a lot of the pre-sequel farming was just like sitting at vendors in the grinder. And then non-red text farming, there really wasn't a good source for that either in the pre-sequel. So the pre-sequel is kind of, I love the game, don't get me wrong. I will defend the pre-sequel to the day I die, but farming was not a great part of it. So then we go to Borderlands 3. Dedicated sources were awesome in Borderlands 3. Most guns had them. They were the same 10% drop rate as Borderlands 2. So dedicated sources in Borderlands 3, chef's kiss, great, wonderful. 2 and 3 nailed that. World drops were so high that like you never even touched your regular guns or like blue unique story quest guns, which is why I think maybe we don't have it in Borderlands 4. It just, they way overtuned that, and it's just like, I remember like last time I went through and like replayed Borderlands 3, I couldn't even keep up with the legendaries I was getting. I would like get a red text gun, shoot an enemy with it twice, and I have a new one. It was kind of ridiculous. I like that journey of like trying out weapons and like playing the game and picking new things up. Like, oh, this is getting a little weak, let me try this. And Borderlands 3, it's just like I couldn't even try anything because it was like overwhelming with legendaries. I don't think it killed the large range sources as well. Well, it did at first, but then they patched a lot of that out, which wasn't great. So that wasn't ideal for it either. Vendor farming, I think it was, you didn't really need it, but they were in there, and I think Borderlands 3 hit that really well because you got so many legendaries. You didn't have to like sit there and vendor farm, but like if you check vendors, they are there. Grinder crafting, it had the re-rolling for anointments, which was good. And it wasn't too bad. It was like too expensive and kind of limiting that way, and it was hard to get the right anointment you wanted a lot of times, but at least you had a way to do that. So you could get a drop that was solid on parts, a bad anointment, go get the anointment you need, and now the gun's great. It was a little too reliant on anointments in my opinion, and that was another problem. That's more gun parts than farming. And then it didn't really have the dedicated non-red text spots that I know of in Borderlands 3. But like in Borderlands 3, you almost never touched non-red text gear, which is also just kind of sad because I think when you have a game of a zillion guns and you only use red text gear, that's kind of boring. At least on the journey to the end, you should use that. And that's where I think Borderlands 2 was good. Like, because legendaries didn't drop like candy, you use the regular base guns. And a lot of those are a ton of fun and unique and have personality, and that should be like part of the journey. Maybe at endgame you kind of get more of an all legendary or red text loadout. That's natural. But you should like progress through the game and you use stuff. So you kind of like understand the brands, understand what you like. I think that's an important part of the play style. Then we moved to Wonderlands, and Wonderlands really didn't have anything but those Chaos Chamber bunnies that you spit gear out of. So, I mean, it did have dedicated sources for some things, but farming in Wonderlands was pretty much those bunnies and Chaos Chambers, and it kind of like felt back to Borderlands 1 farming. It's just like you have one source of kind of, you can kind of tweak it because you know, one was like, oh, assault rifles, you could pistols, shotguns, grenades, whatever. So you kind of tweak it, but it was still just like random world drop. And it was kind of like vendor farming too, because you're not actually like farming bosses. You're just going through and then farming statues. So Wonderlands farming wasn't good for me either. So going to Borderlands 4, where are we? So dedicated sources so far, great. We have a ton of them. I think most guns have been linked to them so far. There are multiple drops per boss, but they all have their same role. So in like Borderlands 2, the problem was if you were going for the sham, the bunker, has 10% chance to drop a sham. But then within that 10% chance, there's the sham, the bitch, or cosmetics. So then you had a 30% chance on top of that 10% to get your roll. And then on top of those rolls, then you have, however many part combinations it is that made it very hard to get what you were wanting. And this one, if a boss has 3 drops, they're not tied into one roll. They each have individual rolls. So we don't know what the percentages are, but if they all have a 10% chance, you could get lucky and get all 3 in one drop. It's rare to get all 3 in one drop, of course, or even 2, but having multiple rolls doesn't crowd the loot pool, lowering your chance to get 1. Now, it seems like some of these rolls aren't the same. Some people are, reporting a lot of like, oh, these 2 are dropping all the time, this one isn't. That might just be confirmation bias, and what you're farming is the hardest thing. But we'll find out when we find out what drop rates actually are. We don't know yet for sure. World drops, I've seen them. They're way more than Borderlands 2, but they're way less than Borderlands 3. They feel like Borderlands 1-ish. Again, it's way too early to say what they actually are and the drop rates, but I've seen them, a handful of them, but not a ton of them, and that's a good thing. I think they kind of nail the balance here. It's not overtaking your inventory, but they do pop up from time to time. And that's what's fun. They should feel special and unique, but not be the only way to get guns. Or like overwhelming where you don't use regular guns, and we're using plenty of regular guns in this game. So that balance is fantastic. Large range sources like tubbies and loot midgets. I have seen loot enemies, but I don't know if there's a reliable place to find them yet, and they seem to mainly drop a lot of like purples and blues. I haven't seen a lot of world drops from them, and just a lot of cash, which is pointless in this game. So I don't think this is good in the game right now, and hopefully with DLC maybe we get some like loot midget dedicated sources like we did, or tubby dedicated sources like we had in Borderlands 2, because those are a lot of fun. So that's one way they could improve in Borderlands 4. I think the first 2 are like spot on. They don't have to touch those. Vendor farming, I think this is spot on too in Borderlands 4. They definitely pop up in vendors, but it's not. There's enough good ways to get legendaries where you're not just sitting there rebooting your game to check a vendor. And that's the way it should be. It's like, oh, hey, I just jump into the game. Let me check the vendors quick. Or I'm headed through this hub town. Let me check the vendors just to see. But you're not farming them. And that's a good balance. Because if the other farmings are good, vendor drops should be like world drops where like you're not relying on them, but they pop up and it's like that little rush and you get excited. And that's where I think we are, which is, again, fantastic. Grinder crafting, we do have the firmware crafting where you can swap firmware to different pieces, which I think is really good. They could have added something like the anointment rerolls with maybe trying to reroll a licensed part or an inner barrel. I don't think it's particularly needed. But I don't know if that would hurt the game or not. Right now, I think just the firmware is kind of nice. We do have some stuff we can change. Firmware could be important for min-maxing end game builds, so be able to swap those around. I haven't played with firmware enough. I think some things get locked. I just have to understand it better. So I think they could tweak the firmware to be a little bit different maybe, but I think we're pretty good for 0.5. And then the non-red text farming, I think this is where the game lets us down. So with these underbarrels and dedicated parts, there's a lot of like purple guns. There's some like flat off SMGs people are going after. Like the Mollywan, that Tri-Blast, I forget what it's exactly called, the spread launcher for Jacob shotguns. There's a bunch of these parts that people want to farm. The crit knife, obviously, unless it gets nerfed, but there might be some other grenades. So there are like non-red text, non-legendary parts that people are farming for, and it's just, you just have to go and kill a lot of enemies, farm a boss, and just hope they drop those things. So it would be nice if we got like a snowman type source where we could like, hey, if you want shotguns, go here. If you want, maybe it's not all in one like the snowman, but it'd be nice if like, oh, this boss is more likely to drop shotguns. This boss is more likely to drop Mollywan. This boss is more likely to do pistols, or like whether it's a type, shield grenade, or a vendor's, something where we could farm those. So in Borderlands 4, dedicated drops A+, world drops A+, large range sources not really existed right now, so that's probably a D. Vendor farming A+, crafting I'll get a B for now. There's some stuff in there I'm not sure how great it is, and it probably could be better. And then number 6, red text farming. I think they do drop a lot, so I will say this for red text farming: we drop a lot of purples and blues compared to green and whites, and that's a very important difference. So like Borderlands 2, you would kill a boss and 95% of the drops were green or whites. There's like 1 or 2 purples, and then maybe a rare chance at a legendary. In Borderlands 4, you kill these bosses, you have like a sea of blues and purples and very few greens and whites. So that's really good in Borderlands 4. So that's where I'm gonna not, just because they're not a dedicated source like the snowman, doesn't mean it's like a D, because they do drop like crazy, but it's so random. I'm gonna go maybe C+, B- here. Maybe it's just a solid B because they do drop so much, but there's not like a place to go. It's just completely random. So overall, I think this is the best farming we've had in a game so far, and with DLCs and all that stuff coming, you also have like the shiny guns, whatever we're calling that, and we know pearls are coming, and a bunch of DLC weapons. So I think when the DLC package comes, this is going to be fantastic for farming, and hopefully they can fix a few of the shortcomings of farming, give us a snowman type thing, give us more of a dedicated source for like tubby loot midget type farming, and then that way it can be a little more fun for different people doing different types of farming, which is always great. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you guys think about the farming and the drops in this game, and I will talk to you later. Bye.